from your first dollar doing some web development gigs, and after that starting Shopify development?
I was like super prepared like to finally get rich, because I think like nobody going on these sites like said, I was okay, now I'm done with gambling, let's buy some V2 masks. Especially developers, they come here because they want to develop something. They're not here to talk to people and solve actual problems.
How was the experience getting your first positive feedback from your first Shopify app?
It was mind-blowing. I was so happy. That was like the honeymoon period between Shopify and I was going to have competition anyways, and you cannot just buy the entire app store.
So, hi, welcome guys to the 9th episode of Yalla Let's Code podcast, a podcast where we interview a software engineer to share their entrepreneurial story. And here we are on the 9th episode of the podcast. We have Alexander that he will be sharing his story about how he built his Shopify apps, also about his products, Fusion Metrics, and also at the end for the Shopify acquisition strategy that he managed to done. Let's see you after this intro.
Great to be here. My name is Alexander Hupfer. As Ilya just said, I do build Shopify apps. I build Fusion Metrics, and I can tell a little bit about the things that you just mentioned.
Awesome. So the first question that I usually ask my guests is how they get started into web development.
Yeah, that has been a long time ago, I should say. And I think I never really told it anywhere, but so it all started when I was like 16 together with a friend. And actually like in high school, we got into web development, actually through a teacher that was also quite new in doing that stuff. And so it was quite fun actually back then. We didn't have so much internet access. So we mainly were like building individual websites that like were sitting there on the local network, and if you had like this is a network with computers hooked, you could go to other people's websites, and that were all locally hosted back then. So that was like really the first lines of HTML that I wrote, and that was the time where everybody wrote like table layouts. CSS was super new back then. And so then the first real web development, that was a bit later. And so also some of you might remember Half-Life and Counter-Strike. And so we could build your own maps for that. And so we found some communities. And so we had this idea of like building our own community around that, writing tutorials and like growing a community. And that was like the first time we were actually, I think, hosting a BB board and writing some PHP. And so we were able to grow a small community of some 100 people basically in the German web that was like centered around like building these maps. And so this was really like the first lines of code that I wrote that were running on a server. And then there was like for a long time, like really not anything. So I had another focus, or was doing other things, and I studied physics. And around that, I did some more like development, like mostly Python code to do some simulations and stuff. And eventually there just was then that Python became like a popular language actually for web development. It wasn't always like that. So I think there was like a time where it was almost like a no-go to use Python on web development. And so then really this is where I got more serious about it, I would say. And then I think the next real stop is like when I started building Shopify apps.
Awesome. So you mentioned a lot of things. So you started with the HTML stuff back then. Before the CSS come out, and you are just using the table. And after that, going to PHP. And after that, Python come out, and you start using Python for that. And you mentioned you study physics. You didn't study like a computer science. It's you taught yourself how to code from the start, from like at the age of 16 until right now.
Yeah, basically. So
sounds good.
So there was like really like the tough decision on like after high school, like what to do now. Like, do I want to study computer science or do I want to do physics? I really had a passion for physics like in high school. And like, my thinking was like, let's do physics because computer science stuff, like I can always do it on the side. So let's do something like quote unquote serious. Back then, I think computer science that just didn't sound so serious enough. I think that was the reason why I thought doing physics is is a better choice. And like people that are undecided, that want to do everything. So I think they are predestined to study physics because it's such an open-ended field of study. At the end, like nobody really works as a physicist, but there are plenty of physicists like working all across. So that's usually how it goes. And so this is basically the story that like I always had this as a passion on the side. And that's basically it.
Awesome. And switching from web development to more into Shopify development, how was the switch from doing web development stuff and doing Shopify? But before then, I would like to know, did you like work in web development before starting your Shopify business, or you start right away into Shopify development back then?
I would say I almost would have said I was never paid to do web development, but it's not entirely true because I got like a paid gig, but more or less by accident, building out something for my father. He started some association, and like later that thing went another way, and that web piece of website, or that website, was basically sold for I think 1,000 or 2,000 euros back then. And it was like a lot of money for me back then. But like nobody ever employed me to do web development. I think that's for sure. Yeah.
And how long did you been like a freelancer / web developer for before hopping and joining the Shopify business?
So I played a little bit around, and I mean, I always had the idea of doing something entrepreneurial. But so actually finding Shopify and actually discovering like SaaS as like a business model, that was really like a revelation to me, because like before I was just like dabbling around a bit and okay, how do I get started? And I think when I saw this app store and the whole ecosystem, that's the first time where I had a pretty clear path that I was like seeing in front of me, like how to actually get started. I think it's really such a big step, like from going to, sounds kind of cliche, but like from going to 0 to 1. So really making your first dollar online. I think it makes such an impact, makes such a big difference, because like and it's such a crucial step, because once you do that, once you have actually, that means you have a customer, and like this having a customer is like something that like suddenly also puts you on a path. A lot of people that before this happens, that like they make their first dollar, they're just building this project, and then they build another project and side project 1, 2, 3, and it never goes anywhere. They do it like for some time, and until something new, the interest comes along. And by basically, if you cross the threshold into just going from nothing to something, that really, like, for me, it just like such a confirmation that like I was like on the right path, and this path would eventually lead me on to what I want to do.
Awesome. So talking about from your first dollar, doing some web development gigs, and after that starting Shopify development, how was when it was like the first interaction with Shopify? Is it like I was as a merchant? Did you want to try it? Did you want to install it for a friend or something like this? Or just like from the start, you would like to go into developer mode for Shopify?
So starting with Shopify, that for me, that was like during the pandemic. And it all started with a friend of mine, actually, that I know from high school. He has a textile business. They are manufacturing like Gore-Tex and so this functional fabrics. And the customers are mostly I think big customers are like motorcycle, clothes manufacturer, they're usual customers. But since he was in this business, he had all the right connections during the pandemic. And so he said he had this idea of producing FFP2 masks, like in the beginning, at least in Germany, where there was like a big shortage of that material. And it took a little bit longer than expected. Mainly, actually, not the fabric was the problem, but so that metal strip that they have on top of the mask, that kind of makes it onto your face. Nowadays, everybody knows like how masks work nowadays. And so that was the shortage in his supply chain, and that's what delayed the whole thing. But ultimately, he asked me like, hey, can you help me selling this online? And so I was like, yeah, I heard of Shopify. Let's give that a try. So we set up the store, and I was like super prepared, like to finally get rich. And so I was like working around the clock really to get that thing set up. And because I know, okay, time is critical. Like we have to get this running now because like you make the money. This is the time to make money. And so we set up the shop, and then of course, we did not have any organic reach or organic traffic. We had to use paid ads. And I think it worked for about one day using Facebook ads. And then they closed down our ad account saying, you're exploiting the situation, which is true. It was true. And so that was against their guidelines. So we went to Google Ads. Same thing happened. We couldn't even get like our ad creation. We couldn't even get our creatives approved. Then we tried to use Bing, same story, and so on. So basically every one of these major ad networks were saying like, yeah, you can't do that. You're exploiting the situation. And so we were only left with some super shady ad networks like advertising on porn and gambling sites. Zero conversion because I think like nobody going on these sites like said, okay, now I'm done with gambling. Let's buy some B2 masks. I think this just didn't happen. And so basically we sold like no mask. We had like one other product, which was a folding device where you could put this like masks in, and we sold like one of them. I mean, for $100 of ad spend, so it was like 95% loss. So that's my success story as a Shopify merchant, quote unquote success. But doing that, that led me to see like this ads at the App Store. And then, yeah, I was basically looking into that and was like, oh, that's cool. You can make these apps. I can program. Let's do that. And so that was like after the failure of, as a merchant, that was just like the next thing I set out to do. And so I started to build my first app. And yeah, so it took me really long to get this like authentication thing working. And I had a really bad setup for as a stack, like using Flask and SQL Alchemy. It's not the best thing or not the most convenient thing to use on Shopify. You're basically reinventing the wheel all the time. And so this is what I did. But yeah, somebody started to pay for it once I got the billing in order. So I think that the first 3 customers, like every time they tried to accept the charge, the app just broke. And so after that was resolved, it actually worked out quite well and came along quite nicely. And yeah, then the next step is really just like getting some review. And I think I really remember that moment also very well. There's like these couple of like pivotal moments that like I remember very vividly in my app journey, in my Shopify app journey, which is like the one thing, like getting your first customer at all that is installing your app and using your app. And the next thing is like really receiving the first payment or seeing that they make the first payment. And the other thing is like getting your first positive review. I was like really jumping through the room. I was so excited. So that's how I got started.
Awesome. The first question that I have about the thing that you mentioned is, what was the Shopify about?
Yes, so it is managing Facebook custom audiences. So basically, you can sync and segment. You can build like customer segments, and you can send them put them into a Facebook custom audience, and then you can use that for retargeting on Facebook, or you can build lookalike audiences. So it's called Syncmatic if you want to try it on the App Store. And yeah, maybe. So the idea was obviously.
Is it in production?
Oh yeah, it's in production, yeah. But yeah, it's a relatively small app doing. I think that's the app that really so many people have seen the financial stats like over the last years, because I always use it like as a demo with a demo account on Fusion Metrics. So yeah, it's doing around about 1,000 MRR. And yeah, and maybe a little bit about the idea, how I got it. It's really, that was basically together with, I was using Facebook ads, and so I had a little bit of an idea how this was working after that. But what I found a similar app actually that was for sale on one of these brokers where you can buy and sell SaaS on FE International actually. And so this is where I saw a similar app and saw like the financial potential behind it and thought, okay, this is actually looks okay on what you can make with that. And also it's like what was behind it. That's the really difficult thing in the beginning. If you go into Shopify and you have never been a merchant, you have no idea like what problem to solve. And I think that was like the way for me was basically taking inspiration from what is being sold by brokers, because you get a relatively direct insight in the financial potential of something.
The thing that you mentioned about how did you get the idea and stuff, it's really good because I think not many people mention that, but you can like go to this broker, let's say acquire.com, and you can search for Shopify SaaS businesses, and you can list with the MRR, and you can get an idea about what industry you can work on and what Shopify idea you can work on. Maybe you can acquire the app or build the app yourself. You can acquire it to save time, but you can build it yourself if you would like to.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this like a broker, I give you like a good hint about what the market need and what the market is paying for. So if this app is making like a 10K per month, they are like a worth something, and they are like a solving a real problem for the customer that they are paying that much to the Shopify to be able to use that.
Exactly. I mean, there are some things that like are super surprising if you see that the first time. I mean, if you're coming from outside Shopify and like the other app, which I remember because I looked at it, was one of these solutions that basically just say coming soon. So that's all they do. If you launch a new store, you can have like placeholder page like coming soon. And something like that can make like easily north of 1K, probably because between 1 and 5K, I would say, is what they can make. And back then I was like, when I saw that the first time, I was like, seriously, somebody is actually paying money for that? But if you see like the customer base of Shopify, 2 million merchants, I think this is the number that they commonly put out. That actually makes a lot of sense. And you have new stores all the time. And Shopify has a super high marketing budget. I think it's like, don't really remember the exact number, would need to look it up. But they're basically like Red Bull, like half of the company is marketing budget.
That's true. That's true. I think more people are switching to Shopify, especially like a more currently, because Shopify currently is focusing more on the B2B, so more enterprise client moving out of like a other platform and switching to Shopify and Shopify Plus. So there's a lot of potential in working in the Shopify space, especially as a developer. And you saw the number that they mentioned in the Shopify edition dev. There is, I think, about, I couldn't remember exactly the number, but the number of the Shopify app are not that
13,000.
high, but yeah. So it's not that high to be able to compare to other like a platform and like a app stores. So I think there is a lot of potential if you would like to join this adventure of Shopify dev businesses.
What I was about to say, the number of apps, it's not. I mean, I guess if you compare to the Apple App Store, the iPhone App Store, they for sure have a lot more apps than. And I don't know how it compares to other. What else do we have? I guess the Google
We
Play
have
Store.
WordPress and
Oh yeah,
WooCommerce
WordPress. I think, yeah, that's a good comparison. WooCommerce. And yeah, I would love to know what the numbers are in terms of like revenue share from WooCommerce or WordPress. I don't know if they have a central billing, if anybody knows that. So that would be really interesting. But like the number that Shopify mentioned was like the 1 billion that they actually put out per year, or pay out per year to partners. And I think that's actually larger than what YouTube pays out. I think they mentioned that comparison at some point.
Yeah, I think if people are they are looking to build the next SaaS stuff, I think Shopify app might be like the way to go. One of the things that you mentioned about you need to be able to understand the platform first to be able to build on top of Shopify, because currently Shopify, it's diverse. You can do a lot of things. and it's very hard for someone that doesn't know Shopify to be able to build something for Shopify. The thing that I always recommend to people is to create a free Shopify partner account, create a limited dev store, start playing with the platform. You can do whatever you would like to do without paying anything. I think you can just spend a month or something like this, just play around with the platform. You can see how the merchant will use the platform, and this will give you some idea about how you can explore this platform and add new feature that the customer would like to have in the platform. Because people outside of Shopify, they cannot like just start building something for Shopify without knowing Shopify as a platform, then switching to Shopify as a developer.
Yeah, that's true. I know a couple of people that were really successful, actually. And this is actually the people that, in my opinion, have like the steepest rise from the one that I know, from the one that I see, is the ones that like build stores before. So for example, Noah from Social Snowball, he actually started out, he told me, by building stores for other people. And this is where he saw like this need to do a good affiliate marketing platform. And the other thing is like that I see is people that actually came from the drop shipping scene, and also wanted to do a more sustainable business, because dropshipping, it's not so sustainable and it doesn't scale like SaaS does, of course. That's the other thing. So the people that come from that area, I also see being quite successful. And ideally, if you would start from outside, maybe you would do an internship at least with some merchant. I think that would give you a lot of insight as well. And so the next best thing is to talking to merchants, or or the other thing is, if you just take an idea and you just like start small and you build something that kind of like already exists, but put your own spin on it, in order to enter the conversation with merchants. I think that's also a good go-to-market strategy if you're coming from outside e-commerce and outside SaaS. So,
yes, that's true.
yeah.
I agree with you about this point. Yeah.
But then the other thing is, so of course people, and especially developers, they come here because they want to develop something. They're not here to talk to people and solve actual problems. But that's kind of like the transformation that you need to undergo, that you need to learn, like, hey, you're actually here to solve problems. That's what you get paid for, and not like building something that's super shiny but it doesn't help anybody.
Yes, that I think that's a syndrome or a problem with the developer, especially passionate about development. They are like always thinking about the software development part of stuff, like the code and stuff, but are not thinking about the problem stuff. And I think this is one of the mission of the podcast is we are doing tech for business, not tech for tech. We are not building like a software solution just like for the shine of the code and to have the best and cleanest code, but we need to make money out of our skills and our code eventually. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of developer that they just would like to write code. They don't want to talk to the customer, which might be a problem if you would like to get into entrepreneurship, because you need to talk to potential customer and existing customer, looking for their feedback, implement your feature. There's a good part of communication with the other external people rather than just like sticking into the code part.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly. Couldn't have put it better.
Yeah, you mentioned in your first Shopify app that you got like the first positive feedback. How was the experience getting your first positive feedback from your first Shopify app? And how long does it take you from the start to getting that first positive feedback?
Yeah, I can say like how long it took me to develop and getting it onto the App Store. And that includes learning everything that is to learn about Shopify from scratch, or the necessary things from scratch. So that took me more or less exactly 200 hours, because I was time tracking myself to do that. Because if you work by yourself, you easily get lost and you feel like you haven't done anything. So at least you get to quantify like how much time or how much effort you put into something. So that was pretty much exactly 200 hours to to get to that point that you mentioned, to get it approved. And I mean, the approval process, I think it was a bit quicker back then from what I hear. And then, yeah, fixing bugs and like ultimately getting the first 5-star review. I think 200 hours spread out over maybe 3-4 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds reasonable. Yeah. And how was the feeling of getting that first?
Oh, that was mind blowing. I was so happy. That was like the honeymoon period between Shopify and I have to say. I was like through the roof. I was like, wow, it's so cool. Somebody actually pays for it and even likes it. Like, how could it get even better now?
Yeah, that's true. It's like one of the best feelings that you can get.
Yeah,
especially when you are like working solo on this project. So it's like a good feeling to have a good feedback from like a paying customer, not a free one.
Yeah,
a free one also is important, but when someone is paying and leaving a good feedback, that's another level.
Yeah, exactly. And it's 2 levels to that, actually. Like the one is, of course, that you have it like black and white. Somebody likes the stuff you're building. But the other thing is like the business impact of it, because it's hard to overrate how important positive reviews are on the Shopify App Store.
Okay, yeah, I think, yeah, that's a good point. And talking about Shopify Dev, so is this the only app that you have, or you have like other app that you work on after?
Yes, this is. So in terms of Shopify, I have another one which I acquired, and they basically do the same thing. So it's actually the one that I originally looked at and that inspired me, and to build to build Syncmatic, which I just mentioned. And a little bit later, I saw the app on sale again, and I didn't want to buy it the first time because I just did not feel very confident in the migration process, and I didn't want to spend that much money on something where I didn't feel confident that it would actually pay off. And so then the next time I saw this, then I was like, oh, cool. Now that's my opportunity to corner the market, which is like a super stupid idea. But ultimately, yeah, I bought it, and that it worked out relatively well. I have the advantage now that since they do something similar, they have a similar tech step, and like the one is a little bit more like basic in the setup on the functionality, and the other one is a little more advanced. And originally, like I had the idea of maybe I can migrate the users, but that didn't work at all. So if you have a app that, especially for existing customers that have been using the app for several years, like they're very hard to migrate to something new. And like, why should they? They just want to continue the thing they're used to and continue to think the thing to work. So yeah, don't try that. Don't try migrate users from one to another app unless you're sunsetting it. Then you kind of have to.
Always like a migration will be hard. Like from a technical standpoint, there's a lot of things that might break, and you are like putting yourself in a hard position with paying customers, especially if it's like a big app and stuff. And is the app that you acquired from what I understand is like a direct competitor to your first Shopify app?
Yeah, it was a direct competitor, I would say. Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's the one that kind of inspired the functionality and then built stuff on top of it. So it was relatively simple in its setup, but it is a working business concept. So yeah, but of course, like I don't position them as like competitors to each other, but in much more like to cover different segments of the market. That's the idea behind it. But yeah.
Okay. And is the reason behind the acquisition of this app is like the customer base or the tech behind the app?
So when I acquired it, I think the main idea was like, yeah, if I don't buy it, who else? Then somebody else does, and then I have more competition. But looking back, that was like really stupid. That's not a very smart idea because you're going to have competition anyways, and you cannot just buy the entire app store. So that's
You will be the Amazon for Shopify apps.
yeah, just like buy it.
That's a joke. Currently have just 2 Shopify app in the App Store. So
Exactly.
the first one and the second one. Yeah.
Yes,
Awesome.
exactly. Yeah.
So I think this will be a good segue to talking about the other product that you are working on, which the name of it is Fusion Matrix.
Yeah,
which is
revenue and conversion analytics for Shopify apps.
Okay, I think I will give you the mic so you can introduce the product more.
Yeah, I always need to clarify, like to people, that it's not an app for merchants; it's an app for apps. Like in a way, if you have a Shopify app, you can basically measure or track your financials and churn and growth, things like that, and also see basically we have an end-to-end view from when the traffic tracked by Google Analytics comes to your Shopify app listing, and then how this ultimately converts into paying customers, into paying merchants, and things like customer lifetime value. I think it's very good at calculating that and telling you the real value of your customer. Do some pretty sophisticated modeling for that. And so that's what Fusion Metrics
Okay, so it's like
about.
a Shopify partner tool.
It's a Shopify partner tool, exactly.
Okay, and you will link it with your Shopify partner account via API access, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And also you have like Google Analytics support and I think Facebook ads integration, so you can link all the analytics stuff.
It's pretty much like a no-code integration. So you plug in your Shopify partner API credentials, and you connect it to Google Analytics. And what you just said, like, is true. Like, we can do that as well. We can track, for example, Facebook ads. So we have implemented the conversion API on piggybacking on Google Analytics, which is, I think, a quite unique implementation. But like ultimately, it's a workaround for what's possible Shopify App Store, because you don't have direct control of your App Store listing. Things that you, for example, cannot do is install Google Search Console. But yes, so this is how it works. And yeah.
And how long this project has been for? Is it your new project, or it's like
I started about 2 years ago, and so first customers were like middle of 2022, because I'm just doing my taxes, so just saw that. And so where it actually came from, the idea is it all started with, as far as I know, you have pretty much always been able to plug in Google Analytics in some capacity in the Shopify, in the listing page. But then there was always this attribution gap, because when people click the add app button, then they get forwarded to a site that like Shopify controls. You have no visibility. And like the next thing you can observe on your side is actually that they are then landed on your app and they might authenticate with your Shopify app. And so this is then when you see the events from the Shopify Partner API. And so really like the problem that Fusion Metrics originally solved was making this attribution possible. And it was a bit tricky, or it was quite tricky actually, because it's based on the timing. So we compared events and see, okay, when do we see something happening on Google Analytics, and when do we see something happening then through the Shopify Partner API. And then it's also taking into account like offsets between the one side and the other. And since it's dependent on how quick the app works, like each different apps have like different typical offsets. And so this is what's integrated in the calculation to basically fuse these events. And so that gives you like, say, 98% attribution accuracy. But so earlier this year, actually, Shopify introduced this measurement API support. So now they can actually they load directly the information into Google Analytics. What's the shop ID? So actually, we have like now 100% attribution accuracy. Yeah, but that's how that's basically the problem that it originally was built around, and then evolved into like more full featured solution to do all kinds of reports and things.
Awesome. So for people that are interested about this tool, it's fusionmetric.io. Exactly. I will leave all the link, as I mentioned, in the show note in the streaming platform. If you are watching us from YouTube, you will see that in the video description below. So after that, I would like I saw one blog post in your Fusion Metric blog section, you have a blog post that says, "Is the Shopify App Store overcrowded in 2024?"
Let me think. Definitely a lot more apps. I think I calculated that there are about 2,000 or 3,000 apps per year. Seems to be the growth of the Shopify App Store. And this is also the takeaway that I get with talking to people on editions. On editions.dev is so now you basically always can say, there's an app that do for that. There's an app that's doing this or that. But then on the other hand, I still keep on seeing innovation on the Shopify, on the App Store. There are still people coming up with something new, and the technology is evolving. We didn't have, like, now I'm going to mention ChatGPT. So that's one thing. But I think since Shopify, they also are developing their ecosystem, and I think the most prominent is like checkout extensibility that opened up a whole new class of apps. The most prominent is probably checkout blocks that got acquired for, I think, 10 million by Shopify and built by a single developer. And so I think it's that it's evolving. And one thing that Shopify said on edition stuff is that it's not a zero-sum game. So actually the payout per app is also increasing. So it's not a constant sum of money that is now just subdivided by more and more apps. It's actually that the market size is growing as well. And you can see that Shopify has a pretty solid growth annual report. And there's basically a constant influx of new merchants, and they're going to look for some solution. So I think you can still find an angle in the Shopify App Store to build something profitable.
For example, if we have a single app, the merchant will have two options: is either to install this app or not install it. But if we have, for example, 2 or 3 apps in the same category or that solve the same issue, the merchant will have the option to choose which app to install. So they will likely install on one of the apps. So you mentioned that the payout per app will increase. For example, 10K is for a specific problem. If there is a more app, so that's mean there is a more competition. So it's not this 10K will be divided. So this 10K will be increased. So a lot of people will gain from that competition. And also, I think competition will also push the developer or the Shopify app owner to be able to add new feature to improve the experience for the merchant. So I don't see the competition it's not that bad as it seems, but I think if you manage it, I think you can benefit from it. But I'm thinking about competition from the same size app, but if it's from a big company, it's not the same case. So just to be able to clarify that.
Not sure if I understood you correctly.
Sure.
What you mean, like competition from a big company?
For example, if you have a Shopify app and there is a big company that would like to build the same app. So I think the big company will have more resources in terms of engineer, in terms of marketing to spend to be able to bid on a high relevant keyword and stuff. So it will be not the same case as the same size like a Shopify company or app.
Yeah. So what I think is, if it's big companies, I think I'm not sure if there are actually so many big companies that build really good and successful apps. I think the most thing that they're building is they have their existing solutions, and then they build maybe not so great integration, just to have Shopify. And so I always think that's a substandard. It's going to be a substandard solution in some way, because they just want to. It's usually there's some board in the company that decides, hey, we should look at what new markets do we have, and then somebody says, hey, we could do Shopify, and then so they probably hire somebody or try to build it themselves and try to fit how's it called, something round into a square hole. Maybe that's good. You get the analog. You get what I'm trying to say. And so
I think,
if you
this does make sense.
Yeah. And if you talk also what Shopify is saying or what they strive for, and this is also always something that I highlight, is really solutions that are exclusively and primarily built for Shopify. Of course, they would say that because that's their competitive edge, to have the solution that nobody else like WooCommerce can offer their customers. But then on the other hand, it gives you as an individual developer or as a single developer or as a bootstrapper really an edge compared to a big company who has like a big product and a main product that can just to some degree make the Shopify merchant really happy. Whereas like you, if you build something from scratch and if you iterate and if you build primarily for Shopify, you not only save your resources, and I think it's not a good strategy. I've never seen it to work out actually, even for big reps to go to multiple markets. They always like at some point get this idea, okay, we're so big in Shopify, we should also like address WooCommerce, whatever else. But what they're telling me is, yeah, we've built that. I built this integrations for other apps, but still 99% of our revenue and profit is coming from Shopify. There are some other hosted Squarespace. I know somebody who built an integration for Squarespace, and so they have a different business model. So apparently they are paid by Squarespace by Squarespace themselves to build this integration. They're quite big on the Shopify app stores. Maybe that's a no risk business model for them, because if you get paid to build something, then I guess you can just like devote some resources to it. In my opinion, and this is what I see, that's the situation. You're much better off in building for Shopify and focusing your resources there if you start out.
Yep, makes sense. Yeah, I think you mentioned if you just like starting out, you need to focus on one platform, which will be Shopify, and after that, you will have more metrics and more data to be able to make decision about that. And you mentioned lots of things, and it does remember me of the Shopify edition event that we met at. And there is a lot of conversation that happened during this event that is very interesting. And also, I think the fireside chat with Toby and the founder. I couldn't remember the
Klaviyo
company, but it was like a big,
Klaviyo.
It was like a big company.
So it actually had this like funny story called Klaviyo's first customer. So it was like a parking lot that apparently had the need for some email integration. So then the next 9 customers actually were coming from Shopify. You don't need a Shopify account to use Klaviyo. So I think they're not even built they're not even integrate like that tightly into the app. So for example, it's not an embedded app what Klaviyo offers. So it's like their own thing. And but I found quite funny is when Toby brought up this thing was like, about software. So not all fast software is good, but all good software is fast. I guess the Klaviyo guy was just like silent.
It's not the case.
Yeah.
It was like a really interesting conversation about the Shopify. And what was your impression about the Shopify edition event? First of all, is it your first Shopify related event, or like
it's actually my first official Shopify event, and I was like, it was much bigger than I thought it would be. So just like the size of this venue, that was like giant. It was like this hangar, and if you walked in, like you couldn't see like the end of it almost. So that was really cool. And then also, they put like just a lot of effort into this. Could really feel that. And the whole thing like was then like the after party at Shopify's office. That was really cool. And I think this was actually very talked to most people. It was actually at their offices, at their after party. So all in all, I think it was like a really great event.
That's true. And also it's my first official Shopify like event. It was really cool. Like a lot of time seeing a lot of online friend in person, and it was a lot of good conversation with Shopify developer. And I think the Shopify developer, which is a good thing, so they have like good energy, they have good vibe, they are helping each other. I think it's one of the best community in the developer ecosystem, so I would say. So I think they are always trying to help each other. And also the engineer from the Shopify, I met some of them, and they are trying to be able to answer your question. They are trying to listen for feedback and stuff. which is really amazing to be able to see that in person, because in person it doesn't reflect like a in person is very different than online. Online is good, but in person is better.
Yeah, exactly. So I had the same experience like with the Shopify engineers. I had a question for them, and there was like, yeah, okay, this is how you do it. And he started to write down like step 1, use the card transformation API. Step 2, so and it was like so on and so on. I was like, okay, cool, thanks. I wish they had like that responsive of a support when you're not just like meeting in person. But yeah, it was definitely cool to be able to talk to them. And yeah, what you just said about the community. So I think everybody is like is quite smart in the Shopify community, at least the people that I talk to. And yeah, so the other thing is, and it's even more impressive to me because also you have so many inspiring stories in the Shopify community. Just the people that I had dinner with, there's this one good, like I had dinner with this like one guy that I didn't know before that was a merchant or is a merchant and does apps, and he built up that fabric for who I guess they sell to people who do handwork, and they built up like this fabric store that with his mom. Like his mom does email marketing, he does the rest of the operation. It's like they from over Corona, over the pandemic, I think they started to hire like 15 people that were working like at their house doing all the fulfillment. So that's like super cool. And basically you meet people like that all the time that like have these stories to tell how they made something from nothing. And I think this is always so, I found that's really like the magic if you make like something from nothing. And this is like ultimately also what, in my opinion, brings like the whole society forward.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I think I also had the similar experience with heard about different story about how they are building the Shopify app, and everyone has a very different story from the other one. So someone that like have been merchant, someone that's like getting directly into Shopify developer. So it's like a very diverse stuff, which is good. So you can get inspired and like get to know the developer community in person. And as I mentioned before, in person is always much better, which I would like to, this might lead us to the next question about the personal life. I would like to get more about like how your typical day as a founder will go like from the morning until bed.
Okay, wow. Yes, yeah, one disclaimer. I don't do this full time, so I still have a day job and try then, of course, like to fit that in somehow. And not always, I think this is like the quote that always comes to my mind. And how can you do that? Basically fitting that, fitting something, building something like while actually, while also having different responsibilities, is that during World War One, actually people were writing poems and literally and literature while being in the trenches of this war. And I mean, what you can see there, it's not, luckily we're not inside a war, but so if you really want to, you can always find an opportunity and like always find a way to fit that in. And so you just have to look for it, and you have to be flexible, and you just have to adapt. So this is basically how I like to do things, or how I do things. And of course, like it's a lot of nights, evenings, and weekends. And if my wife and my son, if they're in bed, then I have the time to work on something. And the same thing also on the weekend. And I mean, luckily we have really awesome grandparents, and so that helps them in actually having a child to have some more spare time. And of course, like I want to spend like as much time as possible with my family. And then ultimately, there's something you have to sacrifice. Of course, I don't go out with friends every weekend and go around the blocks. That's something that, of course, that I sacrifice. But yeah, I think it's really, if you're adaptable and if you're flexible, I think that's the best traits to actually get something done. And I think that's like the spirit of entrepreneurship anyways, because you are in this, and the whole idea of entrepreneurship basically requires you to be flexible and always react. Okay, how can I solve this problem? How can I get traction? What could I do more? and how can I be better than my competition. It's all a game like that requires a lot of flexibility, and so that would be
Yes.
my answer to your question.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I think it's a good. This is a good answer. And also, you mentioned one of the good thing about entrepreneurship that people need to be aware of is sacrifice. So you need to, especially at certain time, you need to sacrifice your time, your effort to be able to build something that you would like to do for a long time or in the future. So I think sacrificing right now for the future. So this is how I am seeing it. So you need to sacrifice either your time
Yeah,
or
exactly.
effort or
It's like
to be able to
it's
build
like
the thing.
it's in a way, and it's the quote is not from me. Like entrepreneurship is the ultimate delayed gratification, or especially SaaS is the ultimate delayed gratification. I guess you're much get a quicker reward cycle if you do drop shipping or if you sell knitting wear or something like that. Like yes, SaaS like
Yeah,
it
that's true. That's true.
takes a lot of front loading.
And there's like a higher reward at the end if you stay persistent if enough in this long-term game.
Yeah, that's true. There's like a higher potential upside than in many other industries or in many other things that you can do.
Yeah. So I think we are about to make it to the end, and in this end section, I would like to pass you the mic so you can share more about like resources. Also, you can share at the end like a links for people to like know more about you and your projects. So let's start with the resources, and after that, you can mention the link that people would like to reach out to you.
Okay. Yeah, you can I'm on YouTube. Mostly I'm on Twitter. I think this is like where I share content at least daily. Otherwise, my products we mentioned during the podcast, Fusion Metrics and Matic. And yeah, being in this founder and partners community, one of the best things is actually talking to many partners directly. So this is why I actually doing Fusion Metrics is super fun. I get to talk to so many people and like see what their amazing apps are doing and learn new things. And like, I was like, wow, I didn't know you can make this work. So that's what's really cool about it. So yeah, and this is where you can best reach me, I would say. Just drop me a message on any platform.
Also, do you have like books or podcasts or some online resources that you would like to share with the audience, or
books or resources?
You don't have anything in mind right now?
I guess all the entrepreneurship books are already quite well known.
No worries. So I think that's it for the episode. So thank you so much, Alexander, for your time and accepting my invite again for being in the podcast. It was a pleasure having you in the podcast. And I hope you're having a good time talking with me about your story. And I hope you enjoy the time.
Thank you. Likewise. Have a good evening or a good day.
Thank you.